Okay, we're going to go ahead and begin today. Welcome to our monthly public webinars. Every month, the last Thursday of the month, we do a different legal topic for the public. These are topics that are meant for the public and not lawyers, so they're not CLEs. We will not be able to answer legal advice questions during this, but at the end, we will be able to show you how to apply for services. Also, housekeeping wise, we are taping this. It will go on our YouTube channel. If you have a question that you would like to ask, just type it in the Q&A. Again, it can't be about your specific situation, but if you have a question about the law or a general question, you can put it in the Q&A and we can get to that at the end of the presentation. Okay, today we have two speakers. I'm so excited to have our guest speaker, Lizette Roeder. She is a bilingual domestic violence response coordinator from the Arizona Coalition to End Sexual and Domestic Violence. And we'll talk a little bit about the great work the coalition does in a moment. And we're also joined by CLS family law attorney, Carol Park Aiden. Just a little bit, just a reminder, we will not be giving you legal advice. Again, just telling you the law, general legal information. But if you do need advice, please feel free to apply and we'll show you how to get help, again, from the coalition, from CLS at the end of this webinar. A little bit about the great work of the coalition. Each state and territory has a coalition for domestic and sexual violence that is a non-governmental, nonprofit organization. The ACESDV, the coalition, advocates for comprehensive responses for domestic and sexual survivors at the local, state, and national level. The coalition serves as the primary provider of trainings and technical assistance for domestic and sexual violence programs in Arizona, on best practices in programming and administration, and advocates on behalf of programs and survivors and public policy and advocacy efforts. Their mission is to dismantle oppression and promote equity. And then a little bit about CLS. We are a nonprofit law firm. We are organized to promote equal access to justice for all. We try to advocate, litigate, and educate on behalf of Arizona's most underserved communities. We desire to be Arizona's leading legal voice for communities in need by protecting rights, increasing fairness, and providing access to justice for underserved communities. A little bit about CLS. We are in 5 counties in Arizona: Mojave, Yavapai, La Paz, Maricopa, and Yuma. However, we have 2 sister organizations. If you're joining us from outside of those 5 counties, you can also receive assistance from our sister organizations. To the southeast, we have Southern Arizona Legal Aid, and to our northeast, we have DNA People Services. I'm now going to hand it over to Carol, who's going to begin our presentation today. Thank you, Carol.
Thank you, Pam. I hope that I can be heard. I think that's true. As Pam has indicated, I am an attorney here for CLS and family law. Before turning it over to Lizette to discuss the financial safety planning for domestic violence survivors, as well as provide some resources that are available to them, I'd like to offer you a little context about what economic abuse is and how it relates to domestic violence. And in addition, I would like to share some information about economic abuse, its impact, and its impact over how successful domestic violence survivors are in leaving domestic violence abusive relationships. We have a first slide, and it does visually describe the relationship. So we have an umbrella, domestic violence. I think a number of folks have seen this before, but you'll note that at the bottom, as part of the umbrella, is economic abuse, in addition to all other forms of domestic violence. Next slide, please. Domestic violence, as we are aware, is a pattern of abusive or coercive behaviors in an intimate or familial relationship. An abuser uses these behaviors to gain and maintain power and control over another person. Next slide. Economic abuse is a tactic used by the abuser to control or limit access to shared or individual assets, to eliminate or at least minimize the potential and financial independence of a domestic violence survivor. Their goal, the abuser's goal, is to create a forced dependency, financial, economic dependency for the victim survivor and other family members, most often children. Next slide, please. And these are 4 statistics that are horrible. The first one really took me by surprise. Lizette indicated, and as we know, domestic violence survivors basically report that 99% of them experience some form of economic abuse. And in speaking about it, Lizette suggested that that was close enough to 100%. So I'm going to suggest to everyone present that we might as well consider it 100% of domestic violence survivors are subject to economic abuse. That should give us pause. 70% of survivors are unable to have a job. 53% lose their existing job because of victimization. And lastly, and not least, almost 60% of survivors have had their credit harmed. Next slide, please. And yet almost 80% of Americans do not recognize that economic abuse is a part of the dynamic of domestic violence. And I would invite you to consider, certainly not within the 30 minutes that we have today, why that is. Next slide, please. Economic abuse can take the form of, as I've indicated, employment-related abuse, either not being able to get a job or maintain one. It can also limit or forbid access to financial information that most often is shared with intimate partners. It can limit or control the amount of money a survivor receives. And then there is coerced debt. Next slide, please. So what's coerced debt? It's debt that is incurred by an individual under pressure, intimidation, or coercion from another person, meaning the abuser. In intimate relationships, it involves an abuser forcing or manipulating their partner into taking on financial obligations against their will, including things like signing credit applications, getting access to credit accounts of their partner, and engaging in other kinds of financial activities without consent of the survivor. Next slide, please. More specifically, some examples of economic abuse through credit look like unauthorized use of a partner's credit card, or secretly opening up a new credit card account or loan using the partner, the survivor's creditworthiness, making some financial major purchases using the survivor partner's information, or coercing a partner into generating benefits, often government benefits, or creating debt against the survivor's will. Next slide, please. and even more specifically suggesting how abusers can exploit a lot of times government benefits such as SNAP, TANF, Access, Social Security, and unemployment, and WIC. It is not unusual for a abuser to force a survivor to lie on a benefit application or take the EBT cards away once received, or put funds only into an abuser's account that a survivor has no access to. There's also examples like dictating what can be purchased, refusing documentation. That this is the opposite. Refusing to provide, an abuser can refuse to provide documentation that's necessary to successfully make an application for benefits. And lastly, making false reports about a survivor to government providers of benefits. Next slide, please. All of this is incredibly overwhelming to those domestic survivors, and so overwhelming, in fact, that a lot of domestic violence survivors really want to immediately seek financial help or assistance to get a fresh start by filing for bankruptcy. But my last remaining comments are that bankruptcy itself can impact a survivor's credit for probably a decade, 10 years, thus impacting a survivor's ability to maybe get a job if they run a credit check, or to obtain insurance or housing at a reasonable interest rate. So prior to filing bankruptcy, it is really important that a survivor consider seeking perhaps a bona fide counseling service like the website that is just shown there. And that stands for the National Foundation for Credit Counseling. Often people are encouraged, and I think that this would be helpful for a survivor to reach out directly to a creditor to try to work through a plan to pay off their existing debt without filing bankruptcy, or if you have more than one creditor, to seek debt consolidation of all various creditors together and make a payoff plan to pay off that debt. I am going to now turn this over to Lizette to take over on financial safety planning and resources for survivors. Thanks, Lizette.
Thanks, Carol. All right. Well, good afternoon, everyone. As you have heard, my name is Lizette Roeder, pronouns are she, her, and ella, and I'm the bilingual domestic violence response coordinator at our coalition. I'm very happy to see a lot of familiar names. So let's go ahead and talk about safety planning as far as it relates to finances. As you have seen from the slides that Carol shared with us, it is a very nuanced issue, and it's not just a matter of not being allowed to work, right? So here are some of the national best practices when we are considering how to safety plan around our money. First and foremost, we want to make lists, whether it's electronic, on your phone, like it could be a Google Note, an iPhone Note, or it could be just a notebook of everything that we have, of our assets. And it doesn't have to be financial assets. It's just things that you want to be able to take with you, things that matter to you. When they ask you, if your house was burning down and you only had 10 minutes to get out, what would you take with you? That is exactly what we're talking about. We want to start having survivors think about what it is that they want to take with them if leaving is part of that plan short term. We want to start changing all login information for emails and set up a new email address. What is even safer than that, in my opinion, is just get a new email address. Sometimes if we start changing passwords or logins and the person who is abusing gets a whiff of that, it could be more dangerous. So if it's safe, start slowly changing passwords. But if it's not safe, just get a whole new email address that they are not aware of. As Carol said, it's always good to reach out to our creditors and because they would like you to pay something instead of nothing at all. So if you explain the situation to whatever comfort you or a comfort level you have about what it is that's going on in your life, they could have an opportunity to do a delayed plan, a payment plan, a reduced fee. We have worked with a lot of survivors who had medical fees or even utility fees where we had an opportunity to explain what was going on. And because of that, it was either reduced or it was completely taken away. So we also want to change the passwords and security questions for our providers. If you have the option to make up your own security question, always go with that. Because as we saw from the definition of domestic violence, it is a pattern of coercive or abusive behaviors in any intimate or familial relationship, meaning that these people are going to probably know your mother's maiden name, the first house you lived in, your dog's name, your favorite food, your favorite movie star, right? So if you can actually make it a separate question that is not in that, like scroll down selection, that would be ideal. Ask your banking institutions if you can set up a safe word to access accounts. And the reason we do this is because if you have been banking with the same institution for a long while, they get to know everyone, they get to know their customers. So if the abuser goes and starts asking about, oh, lately, I know they've been coming to the bank more, they can try and dig for information which could lead to less safety for the survivor. If you're setting a new bank account, choose a different institution from the one used by the abuser. So if my abusive partner and I are banking at Wells Fargo, I do not want to open a new bank account at Wells Fargo. Once again, is to create that distance, to get new people involved, a new set of eyes, but also to increase safety for the survivor overall. If you have credit cards, consider setting up credit alerts. It's really simple. It's not a credit freeze, although that is something you can also do, but the credit alerts will alert you if there's any fraudulent activity on any of your cards. You can go online, fill out a few things, a few questions, press a button, and there you go. And the credit alerts are going to be good for a year, and then you can keep asking for those credit alerts after that year is over. Consider calling any of the 3 credit bureaus to place the initial fraud alert. And you don't even have to call. You can actually do it online if it's safe. So it's always good to remember that credit abuse is the biggest way in which we're seeing financial abuse in relationships where domestic violence is occurring, which, as we have talked about, is more or less every single relationship. Next slide, please. A few other things that we want to talk to survivors about is having a story to explain any activity that they are up to. Why did they go out? Why were they meeting with a person? Who is that person to you? When working with an advocate, we always talk to them about, who am I to you if we were to get caught, or if they start asking about what you're up to? Oh, they're just someone that I saw recently that I used to go to high school with, or, oh, they just are someone that's selling Avon and they were trying to get me to buy something. What is the story? What is your relationship? And if it's relating money, how is it that they came about that money? For example, oh, well, I had bought something, it didn't fit, I forgot all about it, and I just remembered, so I went and I got title paper traces of any documentation, but sorry, I see that my internet connection is unstable, so please do let me know in the chat if I'm cutting off too badly, and I'll pause. But you can use my my safety plan app or other apps that allow you to safeguard those documents. When possible, receive all account communications after you have done that initial safety planning and screening and setup of a new email address. And practice good technology safety habits. It's always good to clear our cookies after every single visit. Do not ask Google to save your password. And that can be very difficult because we know that abuse can also have an impact on a person's memory. But that is something that we as advocates or as allies can help them with. Try to figure out how we can do this in a safe manner, but to actually do it. Next slide, please. Technology plays a big role, and majority of us now are able to check our balances or even transfer money using just an app. So if that is something that the survivor is working with, we want to make sure that we ask them about their habits. How often do you check it? When was the last time you checked your password or changed your password? When was the last time that they had access to it that you know of? And that'll help us determine what additional safety planning we can do around technology itself. This is also going to apply to other cash apps like Venmo, WhatsApp, and Zelle, because a lot of people are using these. And what we find is a lot of survivors who are depending on the gig economy, so driving for DoorDash, making goods or arts and crafts and selling them, they will depend on an app like Zelle or Venmo. So how are they keeping that information safe will also matter. Consider being a part of the address confidentiality program. This will allow them to keep their address confidential. The mail gets screened and sent to their real address, but this address is something that they can use as they are applying for utilities, if they're moving into a new place. There are many states that actually have an ACP program also. So what we can do is the ACP here in Arizona can work with a new state if they're relocating to make sure to transfer all that information and for them to continue to be in an address confidentiality program. Contact banks, utilities, department store credit cards, phone companies to place an additional password. You can actually do that. You can ask to do like, think of it like secondary identification, or like, when some of us opt to have that on our email, you can actually do that with all of your accounts. You just have to make the phone call to let them know that's what you want. And once again, make sure to change PINs. And just like our passwords and our answers to our security questions, we don't want to make it our birthdays or the birthdays of our loved ones. Anything that would be easy for us to do a quick Google search and be able to guess. Next slide, please. All right. So I wanna, before I read the slide, I wanna give the caveat that these are national recommendations, but we have to remember that this is not a one size fits all. And some of these might actually put someone in more danger. So it's always good to start having conversations about what safety planning have they done, what has worked in the past and what has not, before we take on any of these. So while in the relationship, we do want to put some extra income or money, no matter how small, in a private separate account or in a hiding place. We want to have a plan of what to do if the money or savings are discovered. That goes back to have a story ready, right? Because once we are in that trauma response, if we're being confronted, we're going to go blank. And so it might be the case that you will not remember what story you came up with, but it'll still help it will still help if you have something there and ready. When leaving, consider taking at least half the joint funds, and immediately upon leaving, 3/4 of funds if leaving with children. That's the one that I want to say we need to be careful, right? Because this could anger the abuser or the abusers, or make it easier for them to track your whereabouts. So if this is not something that is safe, even though it's a national like best practice or recommendation, we need to opt out of it. We always want them, of course, to be able to leave with as much money as possible, but their safety is also very important. Document how the funds were spent if they take money, because they could be asked in court later or for any other processes. Once again, open that separate bank account. And once again, make sure that you are using best practices when choosing your PINs and your passwords. Next. I wanted to talk about Secure 2.0 because not a lot of people know about this, and I myself did not know about this until one of my colleagues let me know that her husband, who's a financial planner, gave her the information. So what exactly is it? It allows retirement plans to permit participants that self-certify that they are experiencing domestic violence to withdraw a small amount of money, the lesser of 10,000, index for inflation or 50% of that participant's account. So what this is allowing, if they can certify that they are experiencing domestic violence, they can make a withdrawal from their retirement. A distribution, made under Section 314 is not subject to 10% tax on early distributions. Additionally, a participant has the opportunity to repay the withdrawn money from the retirement plan over 3 years and will be refunded income taxes on that money that is repaid. So Section 318 is affected on distributions made after December 31st, 2023. So this is really new, and it's one of the reasons a lot of people do not know about this. And I understand that many of the survivors we are working with more than likely are not going to have a diversified portfolio, right? And have a lot of stocks and or a retirement plan. But we can't assume that's always the case. We don't want to make any assumptions about someone's financial well-being or financial literacy or know-how. So it is always important to ask. That is why, blank piece of paper and start making a list. What do you have? What would you like to take with you? What do you currently, what is it that you aspire to have in the near future? And if it happens that they do have a retirement account, then this could be an option for them as they are trying to move into a more secure place. But of course, we all know that leaving is not an event, it is a process. So this is something that we need to consider if we are going to take part of the Secure 2.0 Act. Next slide, please. And Carol and I wanted to go over the gig economy because, as I mentioned, there are going to be different situations. Oftentimes, we will be working with families that have mixed status, meaning that the abuser is someone with legal status in the United States, and the survivor is undocumented or currently in the process of obtaining a work permit. So that means that if they are to leave, they're not going to have the ability to start looking for or, setting up a profile page on Indeed and so on. So what can they do? So some of these will still require that documentation, but I do want to talk about some of the things they can do without, right? So there's content creation, delivery services, childcare, tutoring, note-taking, food sales, craft and specialty items creation or sale. That is one that I see a lot of with our undocumented survivors. They start making lunches for people who are working or busy, or maybe they make tamales and they go out and they sell them. I was telling Carol, I worked mostly with youth, and I had some young adult women who would make like spicy candy or air dried candy, and that was the way in which they were trying to make some profit as they had left their abusive households. There's item resale, although we all know it doesn't give you a lot of money, it is still an option. And then ride shares. As I said, some of these are going to require that you are able to work legally in the United States, but some don't, right? Especially when it comes to that craft and specialty item creation, item resale, childcare, if the person is, okay with that. And for the note-taking and the tutoring, that is something that I want to encourage all of you to talk about with the young adults that you might be working with, or even the adults that are re-entering college, looking for continuing their education. They will be paid by the semester if there's someone in their class that needs help with note-taking. They take the notes, they give them to the person, they get that money. And the same with tutoring. Those are always options. Content creation, I do want to talk about how it might not be safe, and also it might not be comfortable for many. Not everyone wants to be the next TikTok star. And I understand that. But once again, that is always an option, especially if it is safe and it's something that someone has already talked about being interested in. Next slide, please. Regardless of how we go about it, and once we have this list and we can identify what is safe, what has worked, what we want to try, and what we're going to move forward with, what we really want to do is we want to start having this foundation for long-term safety. Long-term safety means safe housing, steady employment, healthy budgeting habits, having a good credit score, and better access to lines of credit with a low APR. We know that APR is very high even at the moment. And we also know that even with healthy budgeting, people are still struggling. But for a lot of the survivors that we work with, this might be the very first time that they're going to be asked to budget, the very first time that they're going to be talking about what an APR is or what that even means. And also, when we're talking about credit abuse, we have to keep in mind that it can also mean keeping someone credit invisible, meaning they have never had an opportunity to start their credit history. This can be something that we see a lot with young adult survivors, but also once again with someone who has been in the process of seeking documentation in the United States. Next slide, please. We wanted to leave you with some resources because I could tell you all the statistics and I can give you, all the ideas of how to safety plan, but that's, it doesn't really give you what the next steps can be and also what you can actually give someone that might be in the situation. So we broke it up into two different categories. On the left-hand side, we have for survivors and their supporters, and on the right-hand side for advocates. So for survivors and their supporters, remember that government resources are there. There are a lot of myths around government resources such as TANF and WIC and SNAP, which is food stamps, but it is an option. The Allstate Foundation has 5 modules that make that come together to make a self-paced basic financial education packet for survivors, and you will get that information in one of the slides coming up. The National Network to End Domestic Violence and Women's Law will allow someone to see what laws our state has around employment rights, coerced debt, and so on. Unfortunately, Arizona does not have laws around coerced debt, but sometimes we're working with people who are planning to relocate or have come from another state where the abuse occurred. So it's good to know what is happening in their state. Equifax, Experian, and FICO. The reason these are here is because we want to encourage everyone to monitor your credit report. And we all get a free report once a year from all 3 of the credit bureaus, including Equifax, Experian, FICO. The last one is not coming to me, but it'll come to me. So what you would do is I would call Equifax and get my report from them in January. Then I would go to Experian and I would do one around May, and then TransUnion. Then I would go to TransUnion or FICO and get one from them in November, December. And that way you never have to pay for it, but you can continue to monitor your credit the entire time. The U.S. Trustee Program, the approved credit counseling, because there are a lot of people who are going to claim that they can fix someone's credit or make it go up by 5 points in one day, but that is not permanent and that could create more damage for the survivor. For the advocates, the National Network to End Domestic Violence has the Economic Justice Initiative, and they have a lot of good stuff, including webinars. Futures Without Violence is currently doing a lot of work around teen dating violence and economic abuse, for which the dynamics are different, right? And Free From has an advocacy toolkit that is meant to get programs thinking about how they can incorporate economic justice into their agencies. Next slide. I very quickly wanted to give you a little bit of a breakdown for some of these resources. Like I said, the Moving Ahead curriculum is going to be those 5 self-paced modules. And it is something that the advocate could do with the survivor, or they can do it by themselves. It is currently available in English, Spanish, French, and Vietnamese. Next. The Independence Project is a microloan program also with the national network where a survivor is going to borrow $100 and pay back $10 monthly. They must meet at least 3 times with an advocate from a local domestic violence program and submit a budget that they can make the monthly payment. However, if they cannot make the monthly payment, if a situation gets worse and they're not able to pay back that loan, the national network will not report that to the credit bureau. They will just let them say, apply when they're ready again. Next. So Tenability is a survivor-led nonprofit. They are based in California. They have toolkits on financial security. They also have virtual classes and virtual support groups around finances. They offer financial counseling, and they also provide information on technology abuse around finances. Next slide. So Free From, they're going to have a savings matching program, and it's by cohorts. So you can go on their website to see if their cohort, they're accepting cohort applications. This one is really neat because it doesn't matter where you are, and there is a super low barrier. They're not going to ask how you're spending the money or what you need it from, because they say, and it's absolutely true, survivors are going to know how they spend their money, and we need to respect that. They offer the peer support groups, they do policy work, and they provide a lot of education around systemic inequities. Next slide. So while this is not routine, it is important to know that a new Social Security number can be issued for victims of harassment, domestic, or sexual violence. All existing records will remain under your old number, but you can use that new number in conjunction with the Address Confidentiality Program to provide that safety. The Social Security Office will only consider applications submitted in person, though. That is something important to know. This is not an online application. Next. And I wanted to just talk about what we do here at ACES TV. As you saw, we do a lot of public policy work. We also do training and technical assistance, but we also house the statewide helpline for sexual and domestic violence, meaning that if someone calls or does a chat online or even text message, they can talk to a victim advocate to start that initial safety planning and also see what other resources are available near them. It is confidential, and they can call us back as many times as they need. We can also help with rent and mortgage payments, utilities, medical expenses, relocation costs, pet-related resources, and so on. And I did want to let you know that as of today, we have new funding that will allow, and I just want to make sure I get it right because it's big. So it will allow for payment for counseling and therapy, transportation assistance, holistic health healing services, temporary hotel stays, and financial assistance to offset loss from work for sexual abuse. So that is something that is starting today. The caveat, though, is that it has to be, it has to have happened October 25th, 2024 and over, but it's something that I wanted to make you aware of. Next slide, please.
That's so
that is
exciting
it.
about your
Yes.
funding. That's
Thank
excellent.
you.
Really good news to hear.
Yeah, it just happened this morning, so
Great, congrats.
thanks.
A couple ways of how to reach CLS. You can do a telephone intake from any of our 5 counties by calling this number 992, or you can do an online intake. You can go on our website also to see how to do this. If you would prefer to apply in person and you're in Maricopa County, Tuesdays from 9 to noon, we're at the Peoria Resource Center. Wednesdays, we're at Native Health at Central and Indian School. And then Fridays from 9 to 12, we're at Mesa Can and Mesa. But you can also apply by phone or online also. We are now going to take questions. I think I saw at least one Q&A, maybe I saw one. I guess I didn't. So the question was, and Lizette has answered it already, what agency does the $100 loan? And Lizette, do you want to say anything about that out loud?
Yeah, so we have a brochure that explains the process, and we have a contact at the national network that works with me. So if you would like that information, if people would like a copy of the brochure, please email me and I can make sure to send that to you.
And feel free to type any other questions, or you can always email us for general questions. I would like to tell you that I said we do this program every Thursday at the end of the month, but next month in November, it is Thanksgiving. So our next public webinar will be Thursday, November 21st. I think I see something in the chat. Oh, that's her. You sent your email out. So Lizette has sent her email in the chat. If anyone would like to see that, thank you for doing that. Okay, so again, you can always reach out to us for other questions. I really want to thank Carol and Lizette so much for this information today. Really, really helpful. I learned a lot as an advocate, and I hope this will be on our YouTube channel, so that if you'd like to review it again, you can. All right, I just want to thank you and have an awesome Thursday, everyone.